Teisha Bader, and in the news, a new campaign to feed children in need in Israel. The Israeli nonprofit Nevet distributes daily breakfasts to 8,000 disadvantaged children in 130 schools across Israel, with hopes to feed even more. Yosef Mandlebaum sits on Nevet's board. He joins us now over the phone from the city of Ra'anana to speak about these efforts and the phenomenon that exists in Israel that many people are simply not aware of. Thank you so much, Yosef, for taking the time to speak with us here on JBS.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Nevet, how it started and what its goals are.
Sure. So Nevet started originally as part of Leket, the National Food Bank. And that was started by someone named Joseph Gittler. And essentially the idea was simple, is to save food that was being thrown out by weddings, by people from different events, and give it to the poor. And then that led to a whole big industry and frankly, big organization that took, crops from farmers who had crops that they couldn't sell anymore. And that merged with the National Food Bank in Israel. As a byproduct of that, they started making sandwiches for kids in schools that they heard there was a few thousand kids in schools who either were disadvantaged because families were poor or because the parents just couldn't operate as responsible parents all the time for various reasons, probably overwork, and these kids were going hungry in school, and therefore were problem kids in school, were couldn't learn and reach their potential. And so they started this little division, and the division grew because the need was there. And then a couple of years ago, they decided to break it off and have its own organization called Nevet, mainly because it's not saving food, actually, it's distributing food in a very specific objective. And so Nevet was created around 2 years ago as a separate organization. And its objective is really to try to feed all the needy kids in Israel, which is around 21,000 children today in Israel across all the spectrum, whether it's Arab Israeli, Jewish Israeli, whether it's religious or non-religious, Bedouin, Druze, in schools, as you said, 130 today, but that's only 8,000 of what we're able to do today. We're trying to reach all 21,000 children who today go to school and they're hungry. And because of that, there are problems in classrooms a lot of times, and they can't focus. The teacher has a tough time controlling them, then controlling the classroom, and, it's a domino effect, as you can imagine.
And I know in the press release for the organization, it notes that most people don't realize that poverty and hunger are serious problems in Israel. Why do you think that is?
Well, a lot of times, especially in the news, Israel gets known for two things, I would say, more than anything else. One is the conflict, unfortunately, and second is high-tech, right? Startup nation. Well, that's great. The conflict, as you can imagine, on an everyday basis, it's 98% of the time you don't feel it here in most parts of Israel. And the high-tech world is only felt in certain sectors in Israel and only employs, let's say, 140,000 people out of the 8 million people in the country. So it's disproportionate to the amount of attention those things get. When you look at the peripheral side of the country and the industrial manufacturing side, and frankly, people we brought in from Ethiopia or from other Arab countries that still haven't fully gotten up to speed, or from Russia, or from other places, Israel's probably the only country I know of that has taken in so many different refugees and immigrants and integrated them as best as they could in society. But as best as you could isn't perfect. And therefore there's a divide. I don't think it's tremendously different than other countries, but it is slightly different here and bigger between the well-off and the not-so-well-off. And unfortunately, because of that, you have a great need. And that need is trying to be met by organizations like Leket, feeding the hungry, and by organizations like Nevet that are trying to feed specifically the children, because the best way out of poverty is education, and then the next generation can obviously get an education, go to university, get a job, and help lift out their whole family. And in order to do that, you got to get through school.
So let's talk a bit about those numbers. As you just mentioned, there are the Israeli children and children all across Israel from different sectors of society, as well as children of immigrants who are coming into Israel to work. The Israeli government's National Insurance Institute estimates over 776,000 children living below the poverty line in Israel. And I know there are many social organizations and government programs in Israel that try and meet those needs, and yet there is this huge gap.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to probably every country in the world, right? There are, unfortunately, the way the system works is there's budgets. Unfortunately, in Israel, a lot of the budget goes to defense, and there are a lot of organizations trying to help out in general. And what Nevitt's trying to do is really solve an acute problem, which is these 21,000 kids who we get the names from, obviously the principals in the schools and the teachers in the schools, who tell us these are the kids who need help. And they come in the morning, we give them a sandwich in the morning, really, because and you'll see in the video that I think you're about to show in a little while, it shows that in Israel, a lot of the children, frankly, eat on the run, so to speak, and go to school and then have their breakfast at 10 o'clock in the morning, or at least a more nutritious part of the day. And we're trying to solve the acute problem of that's a critical point in time in the day for them to eat, especially in the school curriculum and the school day. And the other parts of the Israeli society are really addressing a lot of the other areas, whether that's jobs, whether that's actually feeding and stipends for people who are older people, Holocaust survivors come to mind, whether they're younger generation who just need the help because they can't get out of the cycle of poverty, or frankly it's just families who are struggling to make ends meet and they're working 3 jobs. So there are other areas. As a byproduct, unfortunately, it's usually the kids who pay the price, whether the kids have to go to work because they need the income, whether the kids just don't have food because the parents were too tired because they're working 3 jobs, or because they just didn't have the money to get food. And we believe we can change the world one little thing at a time. Big gestures are great. Unfortunately, they're few and far between. And we believe that we can change the world and make it better for every one child at a time by helping them feed their stomach and then feed their brain. We can make a difference.
So let's talk about the new video that you released and the new campaign, which began at the beginning of this school year, which you mentioned. In the video, which we'll show in a moment, you show American school children saying what they eat for breakfast and showing what they eat for breakfast. And it is actually interesting because it does point out some differences in how Israeli school kids eat breakfast. As you mentioned, at 10 in the morning, it's called Aruchat Esel, and that's kids bring a sandwich, usually from school, and they take it out at 10 o'clock in the morning, and that's when they, in general, eat their breakfast. So that's just an interesting thing that the video kind of points out. And of course, Nevet is now has been stepping in for several years to make sure that those children who don't have a sandwich to bring, for all the reasons you mentioned, to make sure that they are fed as well. So let's take a look at that video, and then we can speak a little bit more about it.
Hi, my name is Nevi. I'm 9. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. For breakfast, I like to eat waffles, cashews, chips and salsa, and fresh fruit, like pear.
I am 9 years old, and my favorite breakfast to have before going to school is eggs in a nest, strawberries, and a smoothie.
My name is Ari Lynn, and I am 9. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. And also, before I go to school, I eat waffles and strawberries.
In the United States, most children eat their breakfast at home. In Israel, on the other hand, most children bring a sandwich to school to eat for breakfast. But not all children have the privilege of being able to bring food to school or have someone who can prepare breakfast for them. At Nevet, we take care of these children by providing them a nutritional sandwich every day. Each morning, we deliver fresh sandwiches to 8,000 Israeli students at 130 schools throughout Israel. It's about more than just nutrition or hunger. The sandwiches help these students to concentrate on their studies and move towards a brighter, more successful future. We're not just feeding them, we're feeding their minds. But we aren't able to meet the massive need that we have for the coming school year. We still have 13,500 children on our waiting list. That's why we need your help today.
So Yosef, let me first ask you, what was the main idea in showing the American school children talking about what they eat for breakfast and then kind of showing what the Israeli school kids do and bringing up those differences. What was the idea behind this new campaign?
The main idea, I think, is relatively simple, which is if you personalize something, right, then people can understand better. So by showing, here's American kids eating breakfast, and by the way, they're all cute kids, and the shows certainly the different type of things, you understand how lucky you are. And most American kids, and not all, there's obviously poverty in America as well, but especially here for this campaign targeting the Jewish children, a lot of times we take for granted, I came from the States, you take for granted how well off you are and how easy sometimes we have it. And that's meant to say, on one hand, look how great it is for you, but wow, there is a need of 21,500 school kids in Israel who really need your help. And by doing the compare-contrast, it internalizes it that we're lucky, on one hand, and says, boy, if I can make someone else as lucky as me, wouldn't that be a great thing to do? And we need help. We need help to get from 8,000 children a day to 21,500 children a day, and we're looking to broaden the support. And really, it's not a lot of money for a family from St. Louis if they can donate, whether it's $100 a year, whether it's $50 a year, whether it's $1,000 a year. These are things which, if we get enough people doing, we can solve this one problem. It doesn't solve all the world's problems, but if we solve one problem at a time, we can make a big difference. And that's what we're looking to do with this campaign. Make it a broader campaign, get more people involved, and make it more sustainable.
Now, Yosef, how does it work when your volunteers go into the schools? I'm guessing that it's can be a delicate situation. No one wants to feel like they're being singled out, that they get sandwiches from not from home, but rather from an organization. What is the approach to try and sort of navigate through that?
So this is the nicest thing about, I think, often it's the little things that make the biggest difference in the world, right? And this is the nice thing about Nevet. We do everything with 100% discretion. The way it works is we deliver to the schools themselves once every 2 or 3 weeks all the raw materials, the cheese, the vegetables, whatever it is that's going on into the sandwiches. Daily fresh bread is delivered, which they're delivering anyway to the schools. And then people in the school make the sandwiches. A lot of times it's the staff themselves, it's not volunteers. If there aren't enough staff, then some volunteers will come to the schools. The sandwiches are made before the kids arrive in schools, and we don't know who the kids are, but the teachers or the principal who's doing it puts the sandwiches in a place where the kids know they can come and get it discreetly. So by the time they're going to sit and eat their sandwiches, and no one knows who got a sandwich from whom. They're sitting it just like everybody else is sitting with their sandwich, they get their sandwich. So it's done to keep the honor and frankly reduce any embarrassment, to keep the pride of the children high and their self-esteem and their self-confidence at a level where, it can hopefully carry them for the rest of their lives and specifically enable them to learn during the day. And I think it's one of the nicest things about the thoughtfulness of how Nevitt built their whole ecosystem and the whole value chain was with the children's self-confidence and kavod, their honor in place. And it's done very well. And, the school likes it because they get to control, obviously, who's coming in, how the sandwich is made, who interacts with the children, which is important, security reasons. The government likes it because they don't want all of a sudden a lot of volunteers to coming in, and it allows us to do the distribution in a way which is anonymous and helps preserve that self-confidence, and which is important for the emotional needs of the children.
Absolutely, and that's so lovely to hear. What do you answer to people, though? And I know we touched upon this a little bit earlier in our conversation. People who might say to you, look, there are hungry children everywhere in the world. Here in the United States, of course, there are plenty of children under the poverty line who don't have food to eat. What is different about school children in Israel? What is unique, perhaps, about their situation?
So I'd say two things. One is, first of all, the campaign is really going out more towards, the Jewish audience. So, I think if we can solve poverty for kids everywhere, I'm all for it. We would certainly love to even replicate Nevet on a global basis at some point in time. But we're appealing to a certain audience where there is a connection, obviously, to Israel, and again, to the country, not necessarily to any specific audience in Israel. Number one. Number two is because when you can solve an acute problem, it helps you solve the next problem. So I can't solve, and neither can you, frankly, no organization has solved global poverty yet. But if you can solve one aspect at a time, you move the ball forward that much, a few inches, but it still moves forward that much forward, and then the next thing's available, next thing's available. So I think by quantifying it in a way where we know we can solve this issue with only 21,500, and maybe it's 22,000 at some point in time, or 23, or maybe it goes down to 19. We know, with the help of your listeners and other people, we can solve this problem with a little bit of love and a little bit of money. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't give to other places, but a lot of times people feel it's a lost cause because, I can't solve poverty, so my dollars aren't going to make a difference. Or my $2 are going to make a difference because there's still going to be a lot of hungry kids in Africa, which is true. But your dollar does make a difference there. But here, the real issue is your $1, $2, $10 actually can solve the problem. And if we can do that, we can then work on what's the next problem to solve, and after that, what's the next problem to solve. And I think that's the feeling of accomplishment, which you don't often get when you give to organizations, charitable organizations, who actually can solve a finite and acute problem.
No, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And I want to just get back to something you were saying earlier about how, when we think of Israel and the challenges that Israel faces, for the most part, we think of the security challenges because they are so dramatic and so horrific at times. There are terror attacks on occasion. As you said, thank goodness it's not on a daily basis. Many things are prevented by the IDF and Israel police and intelligence and all these other things. But you still have it sort of, it's sort of there. It's in the air. There is this threat of terror attacks. There is this threat of rocket attacks that affects people living in certain parts of the country. So I think what happens, as someone I've lived in Israel for a number of years, is that social issues tend to sort of get pushed aside or overlooked is perhaps more accurate because the security challenges are so upfront and so immediate that a lot of times socioeconomic issues are just sort of not given the same amount of focus, and yet the people in this situation of like these children who are helped by Nevet, not only are they dealing with the regular challenges that every Israeli deals with, no matter what their socioeconomic level on a daily basis, meaning security issues, but they also have the social issues. So it's compounded, and it really can be a very challenging situation, I'm sure.
Yeah, first of all, you're 100% correct. That is the blessing and the curse of the state of Israel, is that we have to spend a lot on defense budget. And, without getting into politics, everybody can agree that if we had peace, obviously we can do a lot more with the money and solve problems that way. Unfortunately, I certainly can't. I don't know if you can, but if you can, please step forward. I can't solve the security and peace issues in Israel. But what we can help solve, what I can help solve, and the people listening and others, we can help solve this one issue and maybe other issues. And because of that, you need to step in. And what I've learned here is if people step up to the plate, it's amazing. The government then realizes, okay, we have to give too. We can get more funding from the government. We get more funding from the government. That helps us solve the issue even greater and reach more children. So to some degree, as you said, sometimes, and if you lived in Israel, people here, they never just talk regularly. Everybody screams. That's how they talk. Sometimes Americans get put off by that, but I've learned to just adjust because there's so much passion in the air. And sometimes when you scream and yell, it's like, hey, listen, we're doing this great thing by helping children, and we have so many people around the world helping us. We need a little more help. It rises to the top of the social agenda sometimes, and we can actually help get government spending on that to help solve that problem as well. And ultimately, right, move on to other problems and hopefully, solve even bigger issues as we go forward. So it is a challenge to get attention from the government and from other sources in Israel because of what you just said. But that doesn't mean we have to stop trying. And, our job is to, look at this world and see if we can make it a better place, one person or one child at a time. And at Nevet, I believe we are doing that. We're trying to do that. And with the help of a lot of different people, and companies who are helping also donate, I think we can do that for the 21,500 children in Israel that are doing that. And to be candid, I think just like we export a lot of technology and a lot of know-how to the rest of the world, there's no reason this type of program can't be exported as well to other countries who have a similar problem And again, solving one issue at a time makes the world a better place.
Absolutely. So, Yosef, how long have you been involved with Nevet, and what made you get involved or find out about them? How did that happen?
So I was CEO of a public company called Perion for 7 years here in Israel, and we believed in being very socially active and community active. So we gave 2% of our profits to charity, and we donated usually around 36 to 40,000 hours of volunteer work a year. And we got involved with Leket originally because it's a great thing for a lot of the employees to go out. You know, cut the crops from the fields, and you collect food, and you put them together, and you ship them out. And through that, we heard of Nevet. And I took a liking to it on a personal note. I helped out personally, and the company helped out. And then about a year ago, I was asked to really take a more active role, becoming involved in the board level and really helping try to raise money and think of different campaigns and different ideas of how we can grow our donor base and, frankly, try to help solve this problem. And it's been phenomenal. First of all, the people who work there, Rotem is great. She's a dedicated person who was a lawyer who left her job as a lawyer to come work full-time to really help make Nevet work and help really address the needs of the children. A lot of the volunteers are phenomenal, and you really feel like you're making a difference. And, there's no other feeling in the world like that, which is, everybody likes to make money, and I'm not minimizing it, and everybody likes to work hard, but when you can really help solve a problem and see a kid smile because they didn't go hungry and they're able to learn and enjoy the classroom and see the teachers having a good time and other students, it really makes a difference. And that's worth everything. So I was honored and blessed to be able to be asked and feel privileged to be able to serve.
And I know at Nevet you count on not only financial donations, but also on the work of volunteers, as you yourself were. Talk a bit about those people and that are volunteering and what impact that work makes on them.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think anytime you volunteer, especially on a hands-on type of organization like Nevet, you get to really see the fruits of your labor. So the people here are volunteering, they range from younger people to people who are semi-retired to people who just are trying to find, an hour a week or an hour a month or sometimes, an hour a day to help add some meaning to their life by doing something and not just, writing a check, which is great, but it's also nice to actually, roll up your sleeves at times. And we have a cross-section of people from, all walks of life who just really took a liking to the fact that they can help make a difference in a child's life in not just the food, which I think that's where poverty is important to solve that, but also by doing it at the school, we help increase the environment in the school, help make the whole classroom experience better, help make the teacher's job easier, and by definition, actually improve even kids who had sandwiches but were disrupted by some kids who, frankly, were just disrupted because they were hungry, they couldn't concentrate. And when we see the statistics of, the grades going up, the attendance records are higher, the environment in the classroom is quieter, so teaching can get done. We track all these KPIs, and these are amazing to see that it really makes a difference. And I think that's something which is tangible, which really attracts a lot of people to help come and volunteer.
So just talk a little bit more about the ripple effects of one breakfast sandwich, as you touched upon it earlier, the repercussions of doing that one small thing for a child. It's actually a very large thing, and how it can affect that child's future.
Sure. So there's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point, which I think really highlights what you call the ripple effect. It's the same concept. And that is that one small thing actually has a huge change because it doesn't only change one thing, but it has other effects on it. In the book, for example, he uses Rudy Giuliani bringing crime down in New York City by actually fixing all the broken windows in abandoned buildings, and fixing the graffiti on the subways, because then it makes it feel like your own home. And those little things eventually led to lower crime, part of the reason. Here, too, when we feed a child who's hungry in school, it gives them self-confidence, it makes them pay attention, it makes them behave in class, which then makes the teacher's job easier, which is less distracting to other children in the class so they get to learn more in the class. And then afterwards, they feel like they've learned something because they're able to digest it, not physically, that's what they do with the food, but mentally. And then that allows them, to finish school, hopefully go to the Army, then graduate, go to university, and then ultimately, lift themselves and their family out of that situation to begin with, all because of a small little sandwich. Now, is it 100% because of that? Obviously, there are other factors. But that ripple effect that you mentioned and the tipping point, which is Malcolm Gladwell's coined phrase, those are what makes a difference. And that's where I said we can help make the world better one person at a time, one child at a time. And we can't solve all the world's problems, but we can solve one specific problem with your help and other people's help who can help really make us solve the 21,000 children we need to solve for.
Yosef, thank you so much for shedding some light on the situation and for taking the time to speak with us here on JBS and share information about the work that Nevitt does on a daily basis. We truly appreciate it, and we wish you the very best.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Yosef Mandlebaum sits on the board of the Israeli nonprofit Nevet, which helps to feed Israeli school children who are in need. Thank you, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, JBS Associate Director, Dara Golub, and to our editors, Jonathan McDevitt and Cordelia Siporin, and JBS producer, Carol Lilienthal. I'm Teisha Bader on this edition of In the News.